The knock came again. Mara Whitlock sat frozen at her kitchen table, the revolver still warm in her palm. For a moment, just a breath, she wondered if she'd imagined it. 3 years alone did that to a person, made them hear things, see shadows that weren't there, but then it came again, louder, demanding. "Anyone home?" A man's voice. Rough, weathered, real. She stood slowly, legs shaking, not from relief, from anger. Whatever bastard was out there had the worst timing in the Montana Territory. She'd been ready, finally ready. And now some fool stranger had wandered onto her property looking for, what? Directions? A warm meal? A kind word? She had none of those things left to give. The cabin felt smaller as she crossed it. 18 feet by 20, walls chinked with mud and moss that let the wind through anyway. The fire in the hearth had burned down to coals hours ago. She hadn't bothered feeding it, hadn't seen the point. Her reflection caught in the window glass as she passed, a ghost of a woman. Hollow cheeks, eyes too large for her face, hair she hadn't properly washed in weeks, hanging limp past her shoulders. She looked like something dug up from frozen ground. Fitting, she supposed. "Ma'am, I don't mean trouble. Just need to wait out this storm." Storm. She'd stopped paying attention to the weather. What did it matter if the wind blew or the snow fell when you were planning to stop feeling it permanently? But now, listening, she heard it. The howl outside had grown teeth, the kind of wind that could kill a man in an hour if he wasn't careful. Her hand found the door latch. It stuck. Everything in this damn cabin stuck or broke or rotted. She yanked it hard. The wind hit her first, stealing her breath. Then she saw him. He stood on her porch, if the 3 warped boards out front could be called that. Tall and broad-shouldered, covered in snow. Ice clung to his beard, his eyebrows. His horse stood behind him, head down against the wind, flanks heaving. "Didn't know anyone lived out here," he said. His voice carried the flat, careful tone of a man who'd learned not to startle. "Saw your smoke." "There is no smoke." Her voice came out harder than she'd intended. Unused. He glanced past her shoulder. "Saw it earlier. Been riding toward it for 2 hours." 2 hours. Following a ghost trail from a fire she'd let die. She almost laughed. Almost. "I've got nothing for you," she said. "No food, no spare room. Keep riding." "Can't." He nodded toward the white wall of wind behind him. "Horse is done. I'm not far behind. Just need to sit out the blow. I'll sleep in your barn if you've got one." Don't have a barn. She'd had one once. It had collapsed the previous winter. She'd burned the usable wood just to keep from freezing. The rest lay scattered across her property like broken ribs. The man absorbed this information with a slight nod. Patient. She hated how patient he seemed, how calm, like he had all the time in the world while she stood there with an empty belly and an interrupted suicide. Outbuilding then, shed, anything. "There's nothing." Each word came out clipped. "You picked the wrong homestead, mister." Apparently so. But he didn't move, just stood there, ice forming on his shoulders, studying her with eyes that were too sharp, too knowing. "You got a name?" "Don't see how that's your concern." "Fair enough." He shifted his weight. His horse stumbled slightly. The animal was in bad shape. She could see that even through the snow. Lathered despite the cold, trembling. "I'm Cole Mercer. Run cattle about 15 miles south of here. Was visiting a buyer up in Great Falls when the weather turned." She didn't care. Didn't want to know his name or his business or why he was fool enough to be out in this. She wanted him gone. Wanted to close the door and go back to the table and finish what she'd started. But her eyes kept catching on that horse. Thomas had loved horses. Had a way with them that bordered on magic. Could gentle the meanest bronc, coax a lame mare back to soundness. He'd have already brought this one inside, storm or no storm, property lines be damned. "Your horse won't make another mile," she heard herself say. "I know it. She'll die if you leave her out here. I know that too." The wind gusted between them, hard enough to make Mara grab the door frame. When it passed, Cole Mercer was still standing there, waiting. Not begging, not demanding, just waiting with the terrible patience of someone who'd learned that most things were out of his control. She'd had that patience once, before the land took it, before the loneliness scraped her down to nothing but sharp edges and surrender. "There's room by the fire," she said finally. "For the horse. Not much, but it's warm. You can sleep against the wall." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite relief. More like acknowledgement. "That's generous." "It's not generous, it's practical. Can't have a dead horse on my property. Wolves will come." "Yes, ma'am." She stepped back, opening the door wider. He moved quickly then, efficiently, leading the horse up those creaking porch boards and through the door. The animal balked at the threshold. They usually did. Horses had more sense than people about where they belonged. But Cole made a low sound in his throat and she settled, following him inside. The cabin shrank further with both of them and a half-ton horse crowding it. Mara pressed herself against the far wall, suddenly aware of how she must look, how the place must look. The table with her father's revolver still lying on it. The shelves empty except for one tin of beans she'd been saving. For what? She didn't know. Tomorrow, maybe. Or the day after. Before she'd decided there wouldn't be any more days. Cole didn't comment. He led the mare straight to the hearth, where the last of the coals still gave off some heat. Then he started stripping off his outer layers, coat, scarf, gloves, moving with the economical grace of someone used to hard work. "Got any feed?" he asked. "I can pay." No feed. She hadn't kept animals in over a year, couldn't afford to feed them, could barely feed herself. "Water then?" She nodded toward the bucket by the door. Ice had formed on the surface. He broke through it with his bare hand, filled her only pot, and set it near the fire to warm. The horse lowered her head and drank noisily, desperately. Mara watched from her corner, arms wrapped around herself. The cabin felt different with someone else in it. Smaller, but somehow less suffocating. The silence didn't press quite as hard when it had to work around another person's breathing. "How long have you been here?" Cole asked, not looking at her. He was running his hands over the mare's legs, checking for injuries. 3 years, give or take." "Alone?" The question landed like a blow. She almost told him it was none of his business, almost told him to shut his mouth and keep his observations to himself. But something in the way he asked, flat, factual, without pity, made her answer honest. "My husband died 3 years ago. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You didn't kill him." That got his attention. He looked up, studying her face. She held his gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to be the one who flinched first. "Accident?" he asked. "Does it matter?" "No, I suppose it doesn't." He went back to checking the horse. Mara stayed against the wall, feeling the cold seep through the logs at her back. The wind rattled the shutters. Something outside, a loose board maybe, or a piece of the old barn, banged rhythmically against something else. "You should feed that fire," Cole said after a while. "Going to be a long night. Don't have much wood left." How much is not much? She gestured toward the corner where a pitiful stack of split logs sat. Maybe enough for 3 days if she was careful. Maybe. Cole absorbed this without comment. Then he straightened, dusting off his hands. "I'll get more." "From where?" "I've burned everything that'll burn." "There's always something." He pulled his coat back on. "You got an axe?" "Broken handle." "I'll make do." He was out the door before she could argue, taking the wind and snow with him. The cabin felt emptier in his absence, quieter. Mara moved to the window, watching his dark shape disappear around the side of the house. Fool man. Going to get himself killed over firewood. Going to freeze out there, and she'd have 2 bodies to deal with come morning. Him and his horse. And then what? Dig graves in frozen ground? Drag them into the woods for the wolves? She should have kept the door closed. Should have let him ride past. Should have... The revolver was still on the table. She picked it up, felt its familiar weight. 6 bullets. Her father had believed in being prepared. She'd loaded it that morning with shaking hands, each cartridge a small prayer. Let this work. Let it be fast. Let it finally be over. Now the gun felt different, heavier. Or maybe she felt different. She wasn't sure. Outside, she heard the sound of splitting wood. Not much. Whatever he'd found wasn't proper timber, but the rhythm was steady, determined. She set the revolver in the drawer where it belonged and added the last log to the fire. Cole came back 20 minutes later with an armload of planks that looked suspiciously like they'd come from her collapsed barn. He was covered in fresh snow, his beard now completely white. "Don't say it," he muttered, stacking the wood by the hearth. "I know it's not much. It's something. That it is." He fed several pieces to the fire. The flames caught, grew. Heat began to fill the cabin for the first time in days. Mara felt it on her face, her hands, felt it like a judgment. "When did you last eat?" Cole asked, shrugging out of his coat again. "Don't remember." "That means too long." He went to his saddlebag, pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. "Got some jerky. Hardtack. Not much, but I don't need your charity." "Didn't say you did. But if you collapse, I'll have to drag you closer to the fire, and I'd rather save my strength." He unwrapped the package, broke off a piece of jerky, and held it out. "Consider it rent for the floor space." She stared at the meat, her stomach cramped just looking at it. When had she last eaten? 2 days ago? 3? That tin of beans sat on the shelf like a taunt. She'd been saving it. For what? For after she was dead? Her hand moved before her brain could catch up, taking the jerky. She bit into it and nearly cried at the taste, salt and smoke and something that was almost pepper. She chewed slowly, making it last, while Cole settled himself against the wall with his own piece. They ate in silence. The horse dozed by the fire. The wind howled. The cabin creaked and groaned like it might fly apart, but it held. It always held somehow. "What happened to your husband?" Cole asked after a while. Not pressing, just filling space. Mara swallowed. "Logging accident. Tree fell wrong. Crushed him." "Quick?" "No." Cole nodded slowly. Didn't offer empty comfort. Didn't say Thomas was in a better place or that time would heal. Just nodded like he understood that some things didn't get better. They just got further away. "You got family?" he asked. "Someone who could had family back in Ohio. Haven't heard from them in 2 years." She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. "They didn't approve of Thomas. Didn't approve of coming west. When he died, I wrote them. Told them I needed help. Never got an answer. So you've been out here alone 3 years. No help, no supplies. I manage." "This isn't managing." His voice held no judgment, just fact. "This is dying slow." The words hung there, true and terrible. Mara felt her throat tighten, felt that familiar pressure behind her eyes that meant tears were coming. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. Months, maybe. "You ran out of tears after a while. Ran out of everything soft until only the hard parts remained." "Why do you care?" she asked, voice rough. "You don't know me. Don't owe me anything." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Had a wife once. Back in Texas. She got sick. Some kind of fever. Took her in 3 days." He stared at the fire. "Afterward, everyone wanted to help, bring food, offer comfort. But all I wanted was for them to leave me alone. Let me figure out how to keep breathing without her." "Did you? Figure it out?" "Eventually. Took a few years. Took moving up here where nobody knew me or her. Started over with nothing but a handful of cattle and a plot of land that barely grew grass." He met her eyes. "So I recognized the look. The one you've got. The one that says you're done fighting." Mara's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me, don't I?" He gestured around the cabin. "No food, no fuel, no fight left. That revolver on the table wasn't there for wolves, was it?" Her breath caught. Heat flooded her face, shame and anger mixed together. "Get out." "Can't. Storm's not done." "I don't care. Take your horse and your opinions and get the hell off my property." "No." The word was soft but immovable. "You let me in. That means you've still got something in you that wants to keep going. Otherwise you'd have let me freeze. Maybe I'm just too weak to watch something die. That's not weakness. That's human." The tears came then, hot and furious. She turned her face away, hating him for seeing, hating herself for breaking. 3 years she'd held it together. 3 years of silence and survival, and slowly accepting that this was all there was. And now this stranger, this Cole Mercer, with his patient eyes and his dead wife, and his unwanted understanding, had cracked something open in her chest. "I'm tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being here." "I know. I don't want to do this anymore." "I know that too." "Then why won't you just leave me alone?" Cole stood, moved to the fire, added another piece of wood. The flames jumped higher. "Because someone should have stayed with me. After Mary died. Someone should have sat in my house and refused to leave until I remembered I was still alive. but nobody did. Everyone was too polite, too respectful of my grief. He turned to look at her. I'm not that polite. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo. The walls shook, the shutters banged, and inside in the firelight, Mara Whitlock sat with her knees pulled to her chest and cried for the first time in a year. Cole didn't try to comfort her, didn't offer words or touch, just sat against his wall while she sat against hers, the fire burning between them, the horse sleeping, the night pressing in from all sides. After a while, when the tears had run dry and her chest felt hollow but clean, Mara spoke. The tin on the shelf. It's beans. We could heat them, share them. That'd be good. She retrieved the tin, used her knife to pry it open. The beans inside were plain, unseasoned, but they smelled like something that could sustain life. She set the tin near the fire to warm. I've got salt, Cole offered, producing a small pouch from his pack, and a bit of bacon grease. Makes most things edible. They prepared the meal together in silence, him adding his supplies, her stirring with a bent spoon. The domesticity of it felt strange, foreign. She couldn't remember the last time she'd shared a meal with another person, couldn't remember the last time eating felt like something other than a chore. When the beans were warm, they ate straight from the tin, passing it back and forth. It wasn't much. Wouldn't fill either of them properly. But it was something. A small act of survival instead of surrender. Your roof's got a leak, Cole said, pointing to a dark stain on the ceiling. There, near the chimney. I know. I could fix it, tomorrow, if the storm breaks. You don't have to do that. Didn't say I had to, said I could. He scraped the last of the beans from the tin. Got nothing else planned, may as well make myself useful. Mara wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she didn't need his help, didn't want his pity, but the words stuck in her throat because they'd be a lie. She did need help, had needed it for months, maybe years. Okay, she said quietly, if the storm breaks. They settled in for the night, Cole against his wall, Mara on the bed she'd shared with Thomas and hadn't been able to bring herself to move from. The horse slept standing, hip cocked, completely at ease now that she was warm and fed. The fire burned low, the wind howled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Mara Whitlock fell asleep to the sound of another person breathing. When she woke, gray dawn light was seeping through the shutters. The storm had passed, leaving behind that particular silence that comes after violence. No wind, no howling, just stillness. Cole was already awake, crouched by the fire, coaxing it back to life with the last of the wood he'd scavenged. His horse stood nearby, looking better than she had the night before. Rested. Morning, he said without turning around. Mara sat up slowly. Her body ached, from hunger, from cold, from sleeping in the same position for too many hours. Morning? I'll get started on that roof after I check the chimney. Looks like you've got some blockage. That's why your fire doesn't draw proper. He said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world to wake up in a stranger's cabin and start making repairs. Mara watched him work, this man who'd appeared out of nowhere and refused to let her die alone. Why are you doing this? She asked. Cole glanced back at her. Told you, got nothing else planned. That's not an answer. He was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, maybe I'm tired of watching people give up. Maybe I figure if I can help one person keep going, it balances out all the times I wanted to quit myself. He shrugged. Or maybe I just hate a leaky roof. Despite everything, Mara felt something almost like a smile tug at her mouth. You're a strange man, Cole Mercer. Been called worse. He stood, dusting off his hands. Outside, the snow lay thick and pristine, glittering in the weak sunlight. Beautiful and deadly in equal measure. That was Montana. That was the frontier. It gave you nothing and took everything, and you either learned to love it anyway, or it buried you. Mara had been ready to let it bury her. But now, watching Cole gather tools from his pack with quiet competence, feeling the warmth of the fire he'd built, tasting the memory of shared beans on her tongue, now she wasn't quite so sure. There's more wood out back, she heard herself say. From the barn. If you want to dig it out. Cole looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd walked right up to the edge and somehow stepped back. I'll get it, he said. After the roof. And just like that, the day began. Not with surrender, not with silence, but with the sound of a hammer on shingles and a man who'd refused to ride past, and a woman who'd answered the door when it would have been easier, so much easier, to let the knocking fade into the wind. Outside, the Montana winter held fast. But inside that small cabin, something had shifted, something fragile and fierce, something that might, if they were careful, if they were brave, grow into something worth surviving for. The gun stayed in the drawer. The door stayed open. And Mara Whitlock, who'd been ready to end her story, found herself wondering for the first time in 3 years what the next chapter might hold. The sound of Cole's hammer against the roof became a rhythm Mara hadn't realized she'd been missing. Steady. Purposeful. The kind of sound that said someone was fixing things instead of watching them fall apart. She stood at the stove, if the rusted iron box could still be called that, trying to make something resembling coffee from ground she'd already used twice. The result was brown water that tasted like dirt, but it was hot, and that counted for something. "You want some?" she called up through the ceiling. The hammering stopped. "Some what?" "Coffee, sort of." Sort of coffee sounds about right for this morning. She poured 2 cups, carried one outside. The cold hit her like a fist. She'd gotten soft in that one night of warmth, forgotten how the Montana air could strip the breath right out of your lungs. Cole sat astride the roof peak, his coat off despite the temperature, sweat darkening his shirt. "You'll freeze," she said, holding up the cup. "Not while I'm working." But he climbed down anyway, taking the cup with hands that were red and split at the knuckles. He drank without comment on the taste, which she appreciated. They stood there in the yard, if the trampled snow around her cabin could be called that, drinking bad coffee while his horse nosed around looking for grass that wasn't there. The sky had cleared to that hard blue that meant more cold coming. No clouds, no mercy. "How long you been out here doing this alone?" Cole asked, nodding toward the cabin. "Told you, 3 years. I mean the repairs, the work. All of it." Mara looked at the sagging porch, the broken shutters, the gaps in the chinking she'd tried to fill with mud that just froze and fell out again. "Since Thomas died. He was the one who knew how to build things, fix things. I just tried to keep it all from collapsing. You did better than most would." "That's a kind lie." "It's not a lie." Cole gestured at the cabin. "Place is still standing. That's more than can be said for half the homesteads out here. I've seen whole families give up and leave with less reason than you had. Maybe they were smarter than me. Or maybe they just had somewhere to go back to." The truth of that settled between them. Mara had nowhere to go back to, no family who wanted her, no home except this failing cabin on land that fought her every day. Sometimes the only thing keeping you in hell was knowing heaven's door was locked. "I found the problem with your chimney," Cole said, finishing his coffee. "Bird's nest. Old one, but it's blocking the flue. That's why your fires don't draw right. Smoke's got nowhere to go." "Can you fix it?" "Already did. Pulled it out before I started on the roof." He handed back the cup. "You should have better heat now. Won't solve all your problems, but it'll help." Mara took the cup, their fingers brushing for a moment. His were warm despite the cold, calloused from work. She pulled back quickly, uncomfortable with the contact. 3 years without touching another person did something to you, made you forget how. "I should get back to it," Cole said. "Want to finish before the next storm rolls in." "When do you think that'll be?" He studied the sky with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read weather or die. "Tomorrow. Maybe tonight, if we're unlucky." "Then you should go. Get back to your ranch before it hits. Roof's not done. It's held this long. It'll hold longer." Cole looked at her, that same patient, knowing look from the night before. "Will it? Will you?" The question landed harder than it should have. Mara felt her jaw tighten. "I'm not your responsibility." "Didn't say you were, but I'm not riding out of here knowing you're going to freeze to death the next time the wind blows. That's not your choice to make." "No," he agreed. "But it's my choice whether to help while I'm here, and I choose to help." He turned and climbed back up to the roof before she could argue. The hammering resumed, steady and relentless. Mara stood there holding 2 empty cups, feeling something like anger and something like gratitude fighting in her chest. She went back inside, washed the cups with water she had to break ice to get, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. The plan had been simple. Wait for the worst of winter, use her father's revolver, Let the cold preserve her until spring when some passing traveler might find her. Clean, efficient, no more struggling. But Cole had disrupted that. Had walked in with his dying horse and his quiet competence and his refusal to pretend everything was fine. And now she couldn't quite find her way back to that dark, certain place she'd been before he knocked. The morning wore on. Cole worked on the roof while Mara tried to make herself useful inside. She swept floors that didn't need sweeping, organized shelves that held nothing to organize, avoided looking at the drawer where the revolver waited. Around noon, Cole came down and went to work on the barnwood, digging through snow to find pieces that were still usable. Mara watched from the window as he split what he could, stacked what he couldn't. His horse followed him around like a dog, nuzzling his shoulder when he paused. "You're spoiling her," Mara called out. Cole looked up, almost smiled. "She earned it, carried me through that storm when most horses would have quit. What's her name?" "Don't have one. Never got around to it." "That's cruel. Everything deserves a name." "You want to name her? Go ahead." Mara stepped out onto the porch, studying the mare. She was a good animal, quarter-horse build, sturdy, with a white blaze down her face that caught the light. "Grace," she said finally. Cole considered this. "Grace." "All right, suits her. She got you here when she shouldn't have been able to. That's grace if I ever saw it." "I suppose it is." They worked in a strange, unplanned tandem after that, Cole fixing what was broken outside while Mara tried to bring some order to the inside. It wasn't conversation exactly, more like two people existing in the same space without fighting about it. After 3 years of silence, even that felt like a kind of miracle. By mid-afternoon, the roof was done and Cole had moved on to the porch, replacing boards that had rotted through. Mara brought out the last of the jerky and the hardtack, divided it evenly. "This is your food," she said. "You should take more." "We're splitting it even, or I don't eat." "That's stupid." "Maybe, but that's how it is." They ate sitting on the porch steps, watching the sun slide lower. The temperature was dropping fast. Mara could feel it in her bones. Tonight would be bitter. The kind of cold that found every crack and gap and exploited it. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, surprising herself. Cole chewed thoughtfully. "Not much to tell. Got about 100 head of cattle. Good grazing land when the weather cooperates. Small cabin, bigger than this, but not by much. Barn that doesn't leak. Couple of hands I hire on during calving season. Sounds lonely." "It is. But I chose it that way." He brushed crumbs from his hands. "After Mary died, I couldn't stand being around people. Everyone looking at me like I was broken. Everyone trying to fix me. So I came north, bought land nobody wanted, and built something where I didn't have to explain myself to anyone." "Does it work, being alone like that?" "Sometimes. Other times, it's just quiet enough to hear all the things you're trying not to think about." He glanced at her. "I'm guessing you know something about that." Mara did. The silence in this cabin had been deafening some days. She'd talked to herself just to hear a human voice, had conversations with Thomas's ghost until she realized she was going mad. "I used to think the quiet would be peaceful," she said, "after Ohio. After all the noise of family and town and people always in your business. I thought out here, with just Thomas and me, it would be better." "Was it?" "For a while. When he was alive. We had plans. Going to build a real house. Run sheep. Maybe start a family once we had our feet under us." She looked at the horizon where the sun was turning the snow gold. Then the tree fell and the quiet stopped being peaceful, started being something else. Suffocating. Yes. They sat with that for a while. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of the storm Cole had predicted. Grace shifted in the yard, ears swiveling. "Storm's coming sooner than I thought," Cole said, standing. "I should check your chimney one more time. Make sure it's clear." He went inside. Mara heard him moving around, the scrape of metal on brick. When he came back out, his expression was troubled. "What?" she asked. "Your stove. It's in bad shape, cracked firebox. That's dangerous. You've been breathing smoke all winter without knowing it." "I'm still alive." "Luck. Just luck." He crouched in front of her. "Mara, this place, it's not sustainable. You're running out of everything. Food, fuel, time. Another month and you won't have a choice about whether to stay." "I know that." "Then what's your plan?" She almost laughed. Plan, like she'd had one beyond slow starvation and a bullet. Don't have one. Well, you need one. His voice held an edge now, frustration breaking through the patience. Because spring's a long way off, and you won't make it to see it like this. Maybe that's fine. It's not fine. Why do you care? The question came out sharper than she intended. You don't know me. Don't owe me. Why does it matter to you if I make it through winter or not? Cole stood, paced to the edge of the porch, looked out at the dying light. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, harder. Because I've been where you are, standing in the dark wondering if it's worth the effort to see morning. And nobody, not one person, looked me in the eye and told me I had another choice. They all let me drown alone because it was polite, because they didn't want to interfere. He turned back to her. So yeah, maybe I don't know you, maybe I don't have any right, but I'll be damned if I ride away knowing I could have said something and didn't. The words hung between them, raw and true. Mara felt them like a hand around her throat. Not choking, just holding, keeping her here when every instinct said to run. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. I've got nothing. No money, no prospects, no skills anyone needs. Where exactly am I supposed to go? You could come south. The words were so quiet she almost missed them. What? Cole rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable for the first time since he'd shown up. My ranch. I could use help. The accounts are a mess. I'm good with cattle, but numbers make my head hurt. And the place could use a woman's touch. Been living like a bachelor too long. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a way to not freeze to death. Out of pity. Out of practical need. His eyes met hers. I'm not good at this. At asking. But I'm asking. Come work for me. Room and board. Small wage once the cattle sell. No strings. No expectations beyond honest work. Mara's heart was hammering. The offer was absurd, impossible. She couldn't just leave. This was her land, her cabin, the place where Thomas was buried under the aspen grove on the north ridge. But it was also the place where she'd been dying by inches for 3 years. I can't, she said. Why not? Because, she gestured helplessly, because this is where he is, where we were going to build a life. If I leave, it's like saying it all meant nothing. It meant everything, Cole said gently. That's why you're still here, but meaning something doesn't make it survivable. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to let go. I don't know how to let go. Nobody does. You just do it anyway. The first snow of the new storm began to fall. Light flakes at first, dancing in the wind. Grace moved closer to the cabin, seeking shelter. Think about it, Cole said. I'm not leaving until tomorrow anyway. Storm needs to pass. You've got time to decide. He went inside, leaving Mara on the porch. She sat there as the snow came down harder, covering the yard, the broken barn, the path that led to Thomas's grave, covering everything like it wanted to erase the past and start fresh. Inside, she could hear Cole feeding the fire, talking quietly to Grace. Normal sounds, living sounds, the kind she'd forgotten existed. She thought about the drawer with the revolver, thought about how close she'd come to using it, thought about how that felt like the only choice, until suddenly it wasn't. When the cold drove her inside, Cole had set out the last of the hardtack and some coffee he'd made from his own grounds. It smelled real, strong, nothing like the brown water she'd been drinking. Sit, he said. She sat. They ate in silence while the storm built outside. This one felt meaner than the last, more personal, like it knew they were trying to survive and wanted to punish them for it. How did you decide, Mara asked after a while. To leave Texas? To start over. Didn't decide so much as run out of options. The ranch down there had too many memories. Mary's garden, her chair, the bedroom where she died. I couldn't breathe for ghosts. He sipped his coffee. So I sold everything, bought a horse, rode north until the ghosts couldn't follow. Did it work? Some days. Other days I still hear her voice, still turn around expecting to see her. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. But the ghosts are quieter up here, easier to live with. I don't want to forget him. You won't. That's not how it works. You just learn to carry the memory different, less like a wound, more like a scar. The wind slammed against the cabin. The walls shook but held. Cole's repairs were already making a difference. The fire drew better, the heat stayed in instead of bleeding out through cracks. Your offer, Mara said slowly. Is it real? Or are you just being kind? It's real. I need help. You need somewhere to go. That's not kindness. That's business. What if I'm terrible at keeping accounts? Then we'll figure something else out. I need someone who can cook better than I can, keep the place from falling apart, maybe help with the calves come spring. He looked at her directly. I need someone who knows how to work hard. And you've been working hard out here all alone. That counts for something. People will talk. Single woman, single man. People always talk. Let them. Mara turned the coffee cup in her hands. It was warm, solid, real. If I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what about this place? Lock it up. Come back in spring if you want, or don't, your choice. Thomas is buried here. The dead don't need us to stay by their graves. They need us to keep living. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. He wouldn't want this for you, would he? No. Thomas wouldn't. He'd been the practical one, the planner. He'd have told her to save herself, stop being stubborn, accept help when it was offered. But accepting help meant admitting she couldn't do it alone, meant admitting she'd failed. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Can what? Leave. Start over. Trust that it won't all fall apart again. It might fall apart. That's the risk. But staying here guarantees it. Cole leaned forward. Listen, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust yourself. You survived 3 years out here alone. That takes strength most people don't have. Use that strength to survive differently. The fire crackled. Grace shifted by the hearth. The storm hammered at the walls like it wanted in. Mara thought about tomorrow, and the day after, and all the tomorrows stretching out into a winter that would kill her if she stayed. She thought about the revolver in the drawer and how easy it would be, how clean. But she also thought about Cole's offer, about a ranch with cattle and accounts that needed keeping, about waking up to sounds other than silence, about the possibility, remote and terrifying, that there might be something worth living for beyond mere survival. I need time, she said. You've got until morning. That night, Mara lay in the dark listening to Cole's breathing across the room and the storm's fury outside. She didn't sleep much, just stared at the ceiling and waged war with herself. Every part of her that had loved Thomas said, stay. Honor what we built, don't abandon the dream, but every part of her that wanted to survive said, go. Save yourself. Living isn't betrayal. Somewhere around midnight, the wind reached a pitch that sounded almost human, screaming. Mara listened to it and wondered if that was her future if she stayed, becoming part of the wind, another ghost haunting the Montana frontier. You awake? Cole's voice came soft through the darkness. Yes. You don't have to decide tonight. I meant what I said. Take your time. What if I take too long and you change your mind? I won't. How do you know? Because I've been where you are. I know what it takes to say yes to something new when the old thing is still bleeding. I can wait while you figure it out. Mara closed her eyes, felt tears leak out the corners. I'm scared. Of what? Everything. Leaving, staying, choosing wrong, choosing right. She swallowed hard. Mostly I'm scared of wanting something again. Because wanting things has only ever ended in losing them. That's fair. But Mara, you're already losing everything by staying here. You know that, right? You're already doing the thing you're afraid of, just slowly. He was right. She hated that he was right. In the morning, she said, I'll give you my answer in the morning. All right. They fell silent. The storm raged. Grace slept. And Mara lay there feeling the weight of a choice that would either save her life or prove she was already too broken to save. When dawn came gray and harsh, the storm had passed. Mara woke to Cole already moving around, packing his saddlebag, preparing Grace for travel. He moved quietly, trying not to wake her, but she sat up anyway. Morning, he said. Morning. He finished with the saddlebag, straightened. I should head out. Got animals that need feeding back home. This was it. The moment. Mara felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to let him go. Stay here. Keep to the plan. The revolver was still in the drawer. It would be easy, but easy wasn't the same as right. She stood, crossed to the window, looked out at the snow-covered land that had taken everything from her. Thomas's grave was out there somewhere under the white. His dreams, their future, all of it buried and frozen and gone. "If I go with you," she said without turning around, "I want to come back in spring, to visit, put flowers on the grave." Cole was quiet for a moment, then, "Of course. And I keep my own space, my own room. This is business, not anything else." "Agreed. And if it doesn't work out, if I can't do it, I can leave. No questions." "You can leave whenever you want." Mara turned to face him. He stood by the door, patient as ever, Grace's reins in his hand. Waiting, not pushing, just offering. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll come. I'll work for you. Try it for the winter." The words felt like jumping off a cliff. "If you'll still have me." Something shifted in Cole's expression. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction at having pushed through her walls. "I'll still have you." "Then give me an hour, to pack, to say goodbye." He nodded, led Grace outside. Mara stood in the empty cabin and tried to figure out how you packed up 3 years of grief and failure. What did you take? What did you leave behind? In the end, she took practical things. Clothes, her mother's quilt, Thomas's pocket watch because she couldn't bear to leave it, the photograph of them on their wedding day, young and stupid and full of hope. The revolver stayed in the drawer. She packed it all in a canvas bag that had seen better days, then walked out to Thomas's grave. The snow was deep. She sank to her knees with each step, but she made it to the aspen grove where they'd buried him. The marker was simple. Just a wooden cross she'd carved herself, his name and the dates barely visible under the ice. "I'm leaving," she said out loud. Felt foolish, kept talking anyway. "Going to work a ranch down south, just for the winter, just to survive." The wind moved through the bare aspens. No answer came because dead men don't answer. They just stay in the ground and let the living figure things out alone. "I love you," she said. "That doesn't change. But I can't stay here and die for you. You wouldn't want that." She stood there a while longer, cold seeping through her boots, her skirt. Then she turned and walked back to the cabin where Cole waited with Grace. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." He helped her up onto Grace. The mare was broad enough for 2 if they were careful. Mara settled behind him, the canvas bag strapped across her back, her arms around his waist for balance. "You all right?" Cole asked. "Ask me when we get there." He nudged Grace forward. The horse moved steady and sure through the snow. Mara looked back once at the cabin that had been her prison and her home, sitting dark against the white land. Then she looked forward, at Cole's back, at the trail ahead, at the possibility of making it through another winter. The sun broke through the clouds as they rode, turning everything to gold. It didn't make the cold less bitter. Didn't erase what she was leaving behind, but it made the choice feel a little less like surrender and a little more like survival. And for now, for this moment, that was enough. The ride south took 4 hours through snow that fought them every step. Grace labored under the double weight, her breath coming in great plumes of steam, but she never faltered. Cole knew the land, cut through draws and followed frozen creek beds where the snow wasn't as deep. Mara held on, her arms locked around his waist, too cold and too numb to think much beyond the rhythm of the horse beneath them. They didn't talk. The wind made conversation impossible anyway, stealing words before they could form. Mara watched the landscape change as they descended. Fewer aspens, more prairie grass poking through the white, the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking water. The land opened up, became less claustrophobic than the high country where her cabin sat. She tried not to think about what she'd just done, tried not to catalog all the ways this could go wrong. Strange man. Strange place. She didn't know Cole Mercer beyond 2 days of proximity and a handful of conversations that had cracked her open in ways she hadn't wanted. For all she knew, he could be lying about everything. The ranch, the work, his dead wife. But then Grace stumbled slightly and Cole's hand came down to steady Mara's grip, making sure she didn't slide off. And she thought maybe it didn't matter if she knew him. Maybe desperation made its own kind of knowing. When they finally crested a low rise and Cole pulled Grace to a halt, Mara saw it spread below them. The ranch wasn't much. A cabin about twice the size of hers, a barn that looked solid, a few outbuildings scattered across maybe 40 acres of fenced pasture. Cattle dotted the snow, dark shapes against white. clustered near hay Cole must have put out before he left. There it is, Cole said. Not much, but it's home. It's more than I expected. What were you expecting? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I thought you were lying, that there'd be nothing here. He twisted in the saddle to look at her. I don't lie. About anything. Remember that. There was an edge to his voice that made Mara nod. All right. They rode down the slope. As they got closer, Mara could see the place had been neglected. Not abandoned, but lived in by someone who cared more about function than appearance. The porch sagged on one side. Shutters hung crooked. The whole thing needed paint, though paint was probably the last priority out here. A dog came tearing out from behind the barn, barking fit to wake the dead. Big yellow hound, all legs and enthusiasm. Grace danced sideways, but Cole settled her with a word. That's Bear, he said. Useless as a guard dog, but good company. The dog circled them, tail whipping, as Cole dismounted and helped Mara down. Her legs nearly buckled. 4 hours on horseback after 3 years of barely moving had turned her muscles to water. Cole caught her elbow, steadied her. Easy. Give yourself a minute. She hated needing the help, but took it anyway. The dog pressed against her legs, whining for attention. She ran her hand over his head absently, getting her balance back while Cole led Grace to the barn. The ranch yard was tidier than she'd expected. Firewood stacked neat under a lean-to. Tools hung on pegs just inside the barn door. Even the snow looked organized somehow, shoveled into piles away from the paths. Cole emerged from the barn and gestured toward the cabin. Come on, it's warmer inside. The interior was dim after the brightness of the snow. Mara's eyes adjusted slowly, making out a main room with a stone fireplace, a rough table and chairs. A kitchen area with a real stove, not rusted, not cracked. Shelves lined one wall, actually holding things. Canned goods. Supplies. Evidence of planning ahead instead of just scraping by. I'll get the fire going, Cole said, moving to the hearth where wood was already laid. Your room's through there. He pointed to a door on the left side. Mara crossed to it, pushed it open. A small room, barely big enough for the bed and dresser crammed inside, but it had a window with actual glass and a blanket that looked clean. Looked like it had been waiting for someone. You were pretty sure I'd say yes, she called out. No, but I was hopeful. The fire caught, began to spread. There's water in the basin, towels in the dresser. Take your time settling in. Mara set her canvas bag on the bed, then just stood there feeling lost. This room was bigger than her entire cabin had been at the end. Cleaner, warmer. It felt wrong somehow, like she didn't deserve it. She heard Cole moving around in the main room, the clank of pots, the sound of water being pumped. Normal sounds. Daily sounds. The kind that said life was happening whether you were ready for it or not. When she finally emerged, Cole had coffee brewing and was cutting bacon into a pan. The smell hit her like a memory. Thomas used to make bacon on Sundays, back when they could afford it, back when the world made sense. Sit, Cole said without looking up. Food'll be ready soon. I should help. You've been traveling. Sit. She sat. Watched him work with the easy competence of someone who'd been cooking for himself a long time. He wasn't fancy about it, just bacon, beans heating in another pot, bread that was probably a few days old but still edible. Simple food that would fill the empty spaces. Bear lay down at Mara's feet, his warmth seeping through her boots. She reached down to scratch his ears and he groaned with pleasure, tail thumping the floor. He's already in love with you, Cole observed. Dogs are easy. They just want food and attention. People aren't much different. We just pretend to be complicated. The bacon finished. Cole divided it between 2 plates, added the beans and bread, set one in front of Mara. Real food. More than she'd seen in months. Her throat tightened. I can't pay you back for this, she said quietly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Didn't ask you to. You're working for room and board, remember? This is the board part. He sat across from her with his own plate. Eat. We'll talk business after. They ate in silence. Mara forced herself to go slow, knowing her stomach would rebel if she ate too fast after months of near starvation. The bacon tasted like salvation. The beans were seasoned with something, salt and maybe molasses. Even the bread, dry as it was, felt like luxury. Cole ate methodically, the way men who worked hard learned to eat. Fuel, not pleasure. When he finished, he pushed back from the table and studied her. So here's how this works. I need help with the books, accounts, expenses, what's owed and owing. I'm terrible at it. Can you read and write? Yes. Had schooling through 8th grade back in Ohio. That's more than me. I can manage, but it gives me a headache. He stood, went to a shelf, pulled down a ledger that looked like it had been through a war. Pages stuck out at odd angles. Stains covered the cover. It's a mess. I know it. That's why I need help. Mara took the ledger, opened it. His handwriting was barely legible. Letters cramped and uneven, numbers that could be 4s or 9s. Entries were sporadic, some with dates, some without. No organization she could see. This is bad, she said honestly. I know. I mean really bad. I can't tell what half these entries are for. Can you fix it? She turned pages, trying to find some logic in the chaos. Maybe, if you can tell me what they mean. We'd have to start from the beginning, figure out what's accurate and what's guesswork. How long would that take? Weeks, maybe months. Cole nodded like he'd expected this. Then that's your job. Get the books in order so I know whether I'm making money or losing it. Everything else, cooking, cleaning, whatever, that's secondary. I can cook, I can clean, I can't make sense of numbers. It was more responsibility than Mara had expected. More trust. What if I mess it up worse? Then we figure it out together. But I don't think you will. He took the ledger back, set it on the table. You've been running a homestead alone for 3 years. You know about managing supplies, planning ahead. This is the same thing, just written down. A homestead I was failing at. You were failing because you didn't have resources. Here, you do. You've got a brain and time and me to answer questions. That's more than most bookkeepers start with. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was putting too much faith in her. But part of her, the part that had been slowly dying in that cabin, sparked to life at the challenge. Something to do, something that mattered, something beyond just surviving until the next day. All right, she said, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. The afternoon was spent settling in. Cole showed her around the ranch, the barn where Grace and 3 other horses lived, the chicken coop that actually had chickens, the root cellar stocked with potatoes and turnips and carrots. Evidence of planning, of someone who thought ahead instead of just reacting to crisis. How long have you been here? Mara asked as they walked the fence line, Bear running ahead of them. 4 years. Came up right after Mary died. Bought the land cheap. Previous owner gave up after 1 winter. Spent the first year just trying not to freeze, built it up from there. You did all this alone? Mostly. Hired help for the barn raising and some of the fence work. But yeah, most of it was me and stubborn refusal to quit. Mara looked at the spread around them. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional, solid. The kind of place that could last if you took care of it. You should be proud. Pride's not much use out here, but I'm satisfied mostly. It does what I need it to do. They walked in silence for a while. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, turning everything gold and orange. Mara breathed in cold air that didn't taste like defeat and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not happiness, not yet, but maybe the memory of what happiness used to feel like. The men you hire, she said, for calving season. When do they come? Late February usually. Why? Just wondering if I'd have to deal with them. Strangers. Cole glanced at her. They're rough but decent. I don't hire anyone who can't be trusted around women. But if it bothers you, you can stay in the cabin when they're here. I won't force you to cook for them or play hostess. I didn't say it bothered me. You didn't have to. They circled back to the cabin as dusk fell. Cole went to check the cattle one more time while Mara stood in the yard, watching the sky turn purple and the stars begin to emerge. Montana sky. The same stars that had looked down on her cabin, on Thomas's grave, on 3 years of slow surrender. But here, standing in this ranch yard with a dog leaning against her legs and smoke rising from a chimney that drew properly, those stars felt different, less accusing, less like witnesses to failure. Cole came back leading one of the horses, a big bay gelding with a white sock on his left front leg. This is Duke. Thought you might want to learn to ride. You'll need your own horse if you're staying through winter. I don't know how to ride. I'll teach you. Not tonight, but soon. Can't have you stranded if something happens to me. The practicality of it struck her. Out here, being helpless wasn't romantic or feminine, it was dangerous. Deadly. If Cole got injured, got sick, she'd need to be able to function alone. All right, she said. When? Tomorrow, if the weather holds. Start easy, just getting comfortable in the saddle. That night, after a supper of stew Cole had made from venison and root vegetables, Mara sat at the table with the ledger while Cole cleaned up. She'd found some paper and had started making lists, what she could decipher, what needed clarification, what was completely illegible. You sold 16 head in October, she said, squinting at an entry. For how much? $40 a head. Should be $640 total. She wrote it down. And this entry here? Supplies. Williams. Who's Williams? General store in town. That'd be flour, sugar, coffee, whatever I bought that trip. Do you have a receipt? Cole laughed. If I had receipts, I wouldn't need you. Then we're guessing. We're guessing on about half of it. I know what I spent roughly, just not exactly. Mara rubbed her temples. This was going to be harder than she'd thought, but also more engaging. There was a puzzle here, pieces that needed fitting together. She'd always been good at puzzles. They worked like that for an hour, her asking questions, him answering what he could, both of them trying to reconstruct months of transactions from memory and chicken scratch. It wasn't efficient, wasn't elegant, but it was progress. Finally, Cole stood, stretched. Enough for tonight. Your eyes are crossing. They were. Mara closed the ledger, flexed her fingers. This is going to take a while. I know, but you made more sense of it in one night than I have in 4 years. That's something. He showed her how to bank the fire for the night, where the extra blankets were kept, how to work the latch on her door. Small things. Practical things. The kind of information that meant he expected her to stay. In her room, Mara unpacked her canvas bag, set Thomas's pocket watch on the dresser where she could see it, hung her mother's quilt over the bed, put the wedding photograph face down in the drawer because she wasn't ready to look at it yet. The bed was softer than anything she'd slept on in years. Real mattress, not just rope and canvas. Clean sheets that smelled like lye soap. She lay down fully clothed at first, too aware of being in a strange place, too keyed up to relax. But exhaustion won. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was Cole moving around in the main room, the sound of a man settling in for the night. Normal sounds, safe sounds. She dreamed of Thomas, but for the first time in months, it wasn't a nightmare. Just a memory of him laughing at something she'd said, his face young and unlined. When she woke in the gray dawn, she felt the grief of it, sharp and clean. But underneath was something else, something that might have been relief. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Mara woke before dawn, helped Cole with the morning chores, feeding chickens, checking cattle, hauling water. Then she'd spend hours on the ledger while he worked outside, repairing fence or chopping wood, or doing the 100 tasks that kept a ranch running in winter. They cooked together most nights. Mara wasn't much of a cook. Thomas had handled that when he was alive. But she learned. Cole was patient, showing her how to make biscuits that didn't turn out like rocks, how to season meat so it wasn't bland. He taught her the way someone might teach a sister or a daughter. Straightforward. No judgment when she failed. The riding lessons started slow. Duke was a gentle horse, patient with her fumbling attempts to mount, her death grip on the reins. Cole walked beside them at first, one hand on the bridle, talking her through it. Relax your shoulders. He can feel your tension. Makes him nervous. I am relaxed. You're about as relaxed as a fence post. Breathe. She did. Duke's gait smoothed out. Cole let go of the bridle, stepped back. There, see? You're doing it. By the third week, she could manage a walk around the pasture without Cole's help. It wasn't graceful. She still bounced too much, still grabbed for the saddle horn when Duke broke into a trot. But it was progress. Independence measured in yards instead of miles. The books were coming together too. Slowly, painfully, but coming together. Mara created a new ledger with clean pages, organized by month and category. She tracked sales, expenses, what was owed from buyers who hadn't paid yet. Started to see patterns in Cole's spending, areas where he could save money. You're paying too much for feed, she said one night over supper. Williams is charging you 8 cents a pound. There's a mill in Helena that'll sell for 6. Helena's a 3-day ride. So buy in bulk. Make it worth the trip. She showed him her calculations. You'd save $30 over a season. That's half a cow. Cole studied the numbers, then looked at her with something like admiration. You're good at this. I'm just paying attention. That's more than most people do. It was the closest he'd come to praising her. Mara felt heat rise to her face, looked away. Compliments felt dangerous, made her want things she'd taught herself not to want. But the days kept coming. Christmas passed without ceremony. Neither of them mentioned it. New Year's, too. Just another day to feed animals and check fences and survive. In mid-January, the temperature dropped so hard the water froze in the trough before they could break ice. Cole rigged a fire underneath it, kept it burning all night. They took turns checking it, neither willing to let the cattle go thirsty. Mara found herself on the 2 a.m. watch, standing in the barn with her coat wrapped tight, feeding wood to the flames. Bear sat beside her, his warmth against her leg. Above, the stars were so bright they seemed close enough to touch. She thought about her cabin, wondered if the roof Cole had fixed was holding, wondered if snow had drifted over Thomas's grave, covering it completely, wondered if she should feel guilty for not thinking about it more. Can't sleep? Cole's voice made her jump. He stood in the barn doorway, his own coat half buttoned, hair standing up on one side, just making sure the fire doesn't go out. It's my watch. You should be asleep. Couldn't. Kept thinking I'd hear it die and we'd lose the water. Cole came to stand beside her, checked the fire. It's fine. You did good. They stood there in comfortable silence. After a month of living in close quarters, they'd learned each other's rhythms. When to talk. When to leave space. It wasn't intimacy exactly. More like the understanding between people who work the same land. You ever regret it? Mara asked quietly. Leaving Texas. Starting over. Sometimes. Usually when it's this cold and I'm wondering why I didn't go to California. He smiled slightly. But no, not really. This place is mine. I built it. That means something. Does it get easier? The missing. You mean Mary? Her and everything. The life you thought you'd have. Cole was quiet for a long moment. It doesn't get easier. You just get stronger at carrying it, like building muscle. First time you lift something heavy, it about kills you. Do it every day for a year. It gets manageable. I'm not sure I'm getting stronger. You are. You just can't see it yet. He gestured around the barn. A month ago, you were ready to die in that cabin. Now you're standing night watch so my cattle don't go thirsty. That's strength. Or stubbornness. Same thing out here. They stayed until the fire was steady, then walked back to the cabin together. The cold was so intense it hurt to breathe, turned Mara's lungs to ice. But inside, the fire Cole had banked was still warm. The cabin held heat the way her old place never had. Get some sleep, he said. Morning comes early. It did. It always did. But Mara found she didn't mind as much anymore. The work gave shape to her days, purpose beyond just not dying. In late January, 2 men rode up to the ranch. Mara saw them from the window and felt her stomach clench. Cole went out to meet them while she stayed inside, heart pounding for no reason she could name. Through the window, she watched them talk. One of the men gestured toward the cabin. Cole shook his head. The man persisted. Cole's posture changed, went hard. When he came back inside, his jaw was tight. Who were they? Mara asked. Nobody important. Cole. He sighed. Jim Webster from the ranch east of here, and his foreman. They heard I had a woman working for me. Wanted to know if you were available. Available for what? Work, they said. But the way Webster was talking, Cole's fists clenched. I set him straight. Mara felt cold that had nothing to do with the weather. What did you tell him? That you work for me. That you're under my protection. That if he or anyone else bothers you, they'll answer to me. He looked at her directly. I meant it. You're safe here. She believed him. That was the strange part. After a month of watching him keep his promises, do what he said he'd do, she believed him completely. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just doing what's right. But it wasn't just right. It was more than that. Out here, where women were scarce and men got ideas, having someone willing to stand between her and trouble was everything. That night, over venison stew and biscuits that almost turned out right, Cole was quieter than usual. Mara cleaned up while he sat by the fire, staring into the flames. What's wrong? She asked finally. Nothing. That's a lie. He glanced up. almost smiled. You're getting bold. I'm getting tired of you brooding. If something's bothering you, say it. Cole was silent for a long moment. Then, Webster's not wrong about what people will think. Single man, single woman, living under the same roof. Let them think what they want. Easy to say, harder when it affects your reputation. Mara sat down across from him. My reputation died with my husband. I stopped caring what people thought when they stopped caring whether I lived or died. Still, it matters. Out here, especially. Why are you bringing this up now? Because spring's coming. Calving season. The hands will be here, and people talk. I don't want... He struggled for words. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or trapped. If you want to go back to your cabin when the weather breaks, I'll understand. Mara felt something twist in her chest. Fear, maybe, or anger that he was giving her an out when she'd just started to feel steady. Do you want me to leave? No, but it's not about what I want. Then what's it about? About you having a choice, always having a choice. She stood, paced to the window, looked out at the dark ranch yard. A month ago, she'd had no choices. Just slow death or fast. Now she had this, work that mattered, a place to sleep, food in her belly. She had Duke to ride and Bear to scratch behind the ears and books to balance. She had Cole, who fixed roofs and taught her to cook and stood up to men who looked at her wrong. I don't want to leave, she said without turning around. Not yet. Maybe not ever. If that's all right. It's all right. And if people talk, let them. They don't know anything about us. About this. She gestured vaguely. Whatever this is. What is it? Cole asked quietly. Mara turned. He was watching her with those patient, knowing eyes. Waiting, not pushing. I don't know, she admitted, but it's working. That's enough. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it is. They left it there. Undefined. Unnamed. Just two people who'd found a way to survive winter together without tearing each other apart. February came hard. The coldest month, they said. The month that killed more cattle than any other. Cole and Mara worked from before dawn until after dark, breaking ice, hauling hay, checking on cows about to calve. When the first calf came, a heifer born in the barn with both of them watching, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Joy, pure and uncomplicated. The little thing stumbled to its feet, all legs and determination, and she laughed out loud. Cole looked at her surprised. First time I've heard you laugh. First time I've had reason to. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look years younger. There'll be more. 20 cows ready to drop. You'll be sick of calves by March. She wasn't. Each birth felt like a small miracle, proof that life kept happening whether you were ready for it or not. She learned to help with difficult births, to clear airways, to get newborns nursing when they were too weak to figure it out on their own. The work was hard, exhausting. Her hands cracked and bled from the cold. Her back ached from lifting and hauling, but it was good work. The kind that left you too tired to think, too focused on the next task to drown in the past. Late one night, after a particularly difficult birth that had taken both of them hours to manage, they sat on the barn floor among the hay, too tired to walk back to the cabin. You did good tonight, Cole said. I just did what you told me. You did more than that. You knew what the calf needed before I said it. That's instinct. Mara looked at the calf sleeping beside its mother, both of them exhausted but alive. Thomas wanted kids. I wasn't ready. Kept saying we needed to get established first. Build the house. Make the homestead work. She swallowed hard. Then he died. And I realized I'd wasted all that time being careful instead of just living. You were being smart. I was being afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of losing control. And I lost everything anyway. Cole shifted, leaned back against a post. You didn't lose everything. You're still here. Barely. Barely counts. He looked at her in the dim lantern light. Mara, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You just can't see it because you're measuring yourself against some idea of what you should have been instead of who you are. And who am I? Someone who survives, who learns, who showed up here broken and is slowly putting herself back together. He paused. Someone I'm grateful to know. The words sat between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to name. Mara felt her throat tighten, felt tears threaten. She'd cried more in the past 2 months than in the previous 3 years. Like Cole's presence had cracked open something in her that refused to stay sealed. "We should get back," she said roughly, "before we fall asleep in the hay." "Yeah." They walked to the cabin in silence. The stars were out again, brilliant and cold. Inside, the fire had burned low, but the cabin was still warm. Mara went to her room without another word, closed the door, sat on the bed with her head in her hands. She was falling. She could feel it. Not in love, that was too simple, too clean, but into something, some kind of connection that felt dangerous because it required trust, required believing that things could work out instead of fall apart. In the main room, she heard Cole moving around, settling in for the night. Heard him pause outside her door, his shadow visible under the gap. For a moment, she thought he might knock, might say something that would force them both to acknowledge what was building between them. But he didn't. His shadow moved away. His bedroom door closed. And Mara sat in the dark, feeling the weight of choices not yet made, futures not yet determined, and wondered if wanting something again was bravery or just another way to get your heart broken. Morning came with this kind of cold that made your bones ache. Mara woke to frost on the inside of her window, her breath visible in the gray light. She dressed quickly, layering everything she owned, and emerged to find Cole already up, stoking the fire. "Coffee's on," he said without looking at her. They'd been like this for 3 days now, polite, distant, careful not to let their hands touch when passing things. Ever since that night in the barn when he'd called her strong and she'd felt the ground shift beneath her feet, Mara poured coffee, wrapped her hands around the cup for warmth. "I'll check the chickens after breakfast." "Already did. Got 4 eggs. Then I'll start on the accounts. There's entries from November I still can't decipher." "Fine." The single word hung flat between them. Mara risked a glance at Cole's face. He looked tired, lines deeper around his eyes than they'd been a week ago. She wondered if he was sleeping any better than she was. Bear whined at the door. Cole let him out, stood watching the dog bound through the snow. The sky was lightening to the east, streaks of pink and orange that promised another brutally cold day. "The hands are coming tomorrow," Cole said finally. 2 men, Jack Porter and Sam Chen. "They've worked for me before. They're decent. All right? They'll bunk in the barn, stay out of your way mostly, but I wanted you to know." "I appreciate that." More silence, more careful distance. Mara hated it. A month ago, they'd talked easily, worked side by side without this awkward tension. Now every word felt weighted, every look charged with something neither of them wanted to name. She took her coffee to the table, opened the ledger, tried to focus on numbers that swam in front of her eyes. But her mind kept circling back to the question that had kept her awake for nights. What did she want? Not what she should want. Not what was safe, or smart, or proper. What did Mara Whitlock, widow, survivor, woman who'd stood with a gun to her head 3 months ago, what did she actually want? The answer terrified her. Jack and Sam arrived the next afternoon with the spring thaw riding their heels. The temperature had climbed above freezing for the first time in weeks, turning the snow to slush, the ice to water. Everything dripped and ran and made a mess. Mara watched from the window as Cole greeted them. Jack was older, maybe 50, with a gray beard and bow legs that spoke of a lifetime on horseback. Sam was younger, Chinese, compact and wiry. They shook hands with Cole, unloaded their gear, led their horses to the barn. She'd made extra biscuits that morning, fried up bacon until the cabin smelled like something other than books and coffee. When the men came in for supper, she served them without meeting their eyes, kept her head down, played the role of hired help. "Ma'am," Jack said, nodding to her. "Food looks real good." "Thank you." Sam just ate, efficient and quiet. Mara appreciated that. The less attention, the better. Cole talked about the work ahead, which cows were close to calving, which fences needed repair now that they could dig post holes again, the plan for branding come April. Ranch talk, man talk. Mara cleaned up while they discussed it, invisible in the way women often were when men had business. She was scraping plates when Sam spoke up. "The books look better." Everyone turned to look at him. He gestured to the ledger on the side table, the neat stack of organized papers beside it. "Last year was chaos," Sam continued. "This is actual accounting." "Mara's doing," Cole said. "She's got a head for numbers." "Clearly." Sam looked at her with something like respect. You hiring out? My uncle runs a supply company in Helena. Could use someone good with books. Mara froze. Cole's expression went carefully blank. She works for me, he said evenly. Just asking. Good bookkeepers are hard to find. She's not available. The edge in Cole's voice killed the conversation. They finished eating in silence. Jack and Sam excused themselves, headed to the barn. Mara kept washing dishes, hands moving automatically while her mind raced. She's not available, said like she belonged to him, like he had a claim. When the door closed behind the men, she turned. I can speak for myself. I know that. Then why didn't you let me? Cole stood, carried his plate to the wash basin. Because Sam's a good worker, but he talks too much. Word gets around that you're looking for other work. Every rancher within 50 miles will be at the door making offers. Would that be so bad? Depends. You want to work for someone like Webster, man who looks at women like they're livestock? No, but that doesn't mean you get to answer for me. You're right. I'm sorry. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't want to lose you. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Mara felt her breath catch. Lose me as a bookkeeper, she said carefully. Or lose me. Cole met her eyes. Held them. Both. The honesty of it stripped something away. All the careful distance they'd been maintaining, the polite avoidance. It crumbled. Mara set down the plate she'd been washing, dried her hands slowly. Cole, don't. You don't have to say anything. I know it's complicated. I know you're still... He gestured vaguely. I just needed you to know where I stand. And where is that? Somewhere between grateful you're here and terrified you'll leave. He smiled without humor. Somewhere between wanting to give you space and wanting to ask you to stay forever. Forever. The word hung there, impossible and tempting. Mara thought about her cabin sitting empty up north, thought about Thomas's grave under the melting snow, thought about the revolver in the drawer she'd left behind. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Do what? Care about someone again. Risk it. I barely survived losing Thomas. She couldn't finish. Cole crossed to her, stopped just close enough that she could feel his warmth. I'm not asking you to risk anything you're not ready for. I'm just asking you to stay. Keep working. Keep being here. The rest, we figure out as we go. What if I can't figure it out? What if I'm too broken? Then you're broken. I'm broken too. Maybe we're broken in ways that fit. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. The touch was gentle, careful. Nothing like the desperate grab of someone taking, more like someone asking. Mara closed her eyes, leaned into it. 3 years since anyone had touched her with tenderness. 3 years since she'd let anyone close enough to try. I'm scared, she breathed. I know, me too. Of what? You're the strong one. Of screwing this up, of pushing too hard or not hard enough, of waking up one morning and finding you've gone back to that cabin to finish what you started. Her eyes opened. I won't. Promise me. Cole, promise me. Whatever happens between us, whatever we do or don't become, you won't go back to that. To the gun. To giving up. Mara saw the fear in his eyes, raw and real. Saw that he meant it, that this mattered to him in ways that went beyond attraction or convenience or loneliness. I promise, she said. I'm here. I'm staying. For as long as you'll have me. He kissed her then. Soft at first, testing. When she kissed back, it deepened into something that tasted like relief and hunger mixed together. His other hand found her waist, pulled her closer. She went, pressed against him, feeling solid muscle and warmth and the steady beat of his heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. We're going to take this slow, he said. Slow. I mean it. No rushing, no assumptions. We figure out what this is before anything. Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. Her whole body felt like it was vibrating, alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. I should go check the barn, Cole said, not moving. Make sure Jack and Sam are settled. You should. I will. In a minute. They stood there, holding each other, while the fire crackled and Bear scratched at the door to be let back in and the Montana night pressed close around the cabin. The next weeks were a study in restraint. Cole kept his promise. They took it slow, worked side by side during the day, sat together after supper going over accounts or just talking. Sometimes his hand would find hers. Sometimes she'd lean against his shoulder. Small touches. Careful ones. But the restraint was its own kind of torture. Mara found herself watching him work, noticing the line of his shoulders, the way he moved with unconscious grace. Found herself wanting things she'd thought died with Thomas. The hands noticed. Of course they noticed. Jack didn't comment, but his eyes tracked the way Cole looked at Mara when she wasn't watching, the way she smiled when Cole made a rare joke. Sam was more direct. One afternoon, when Cole was out checking fence and Mara was in the barn helping with a difficult birth, Sam spoke up. "He's a good man." Mara looked up from the laboring cow. "What?" "Cole. He's decent, honest. Doesn't cheat on pay or work his people too hard. You could do worse." We're not. Sure you're not." Sam grinned. "That's why he looks at you like you hung the moon, and why you've been humming while you work for the first time since I got here." Heat flooded Mara's face. "That's not appropriate conversation." "Maybe not, but it's true." Sam's expression sobered. "Look, I don't know your story. Don't need to. But whatever you're running from or trying to forget, sometimes the best thing is to stop running. Stand still. See what shows up." The cow bellowed, ending the conversation. But Sam's words stuck with Mara through the rest of the day, through supper, through the evening when Cole sat beside her teaching her to play checkers. "You're letting me win," she accused. "I'm not." "You are. You just missed an obvious jump." Cole studied the board, swore softly. "You're right. When did you get so good at this?" "I'm not good. You're distracted." "I am." He looked at her instead of the board. "You're distracting." Mara felt that pull again, that magnetic draw. They were alone. Jack and Sam had gone to the barn an hour ago. The cabin was warm. The fire cast dancing shadows. It would be so easy to close the distance between them, to give in to what they both wanted. But Cole had said slow. And she'd agreed. Because rushing felt like tempting fate, like daring the universe to take this away too. "We should finish the game," she said softly. "Yeah, we should." Neither of them moved. Then Cole stood abruptly, crossed to the window, stared out at the dark. "I'm trying to be patient, to do this right. I know. But it's hard, having you here, so close and not—" He broke off. "I keep thinking about what you said, about not knowing if you can do this, and I wonder if I'm being selfish, asking you to try." Mara went to him, stood beside him at the window. Their reflections looked back from the glass, two people standing separate, almost touching. "What if we're both being selfish?" she said. "What if we both want this and we're both scared and that's okay?" "Is it okay?" "I don't know. But I'm tired of being afraid, tired of letting fear make all my choices." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. His grip tightened. "March is almost over," Cole said. "Spring's here. Which means you could go back to your cabin, see how it weathered winter. Do you want me to go?" "No. But I told you, you always have a choice. I meant that." Mara thought about the cabin, about Thomas's grave that would need tending, about the life she'd left behind that was probably better left behind. "I'll go," she said, "but not to stay, just to close that chapter, properly." Cole nodded. "When?" "Soon. Before calving gets too intense, before I lose my nerve." "I'll take you." "You don't have to." "I want to. Besides, Duke needs the exercise, and you're still not confident enough to ride that far alone." It was settled. They'd leave in 3 days, assuming the weather held. Mara felt relief and dread mixed together. She needed to see the place, needed to face what she'd left. But she wasn't sure she was ready. The night before they were set to leave, a late storm blew in. Not as vicious as the ones in deep winter, but wet and heavy. Cole and the hands worked until dark getting the pregnant cows under shelter, moving hay, battening down anything that might blow away. Mara had supper waiting when they finally stumbled in, exhausted and soaked. She'd made stew, thick with vegetables and venison, and cornbread that had actually turned out right for once. "Smells like heaven," Jack groaned, shucking off his wet coat. They ate like starving men. Mara refilled bowls, kept coffee coming, felt something almost like pride at being able to provide this. Simple comfort after hard work. When Jack and Sam headed to the barn, Cole lingered. He was still dripping, hair plastered to his head, but he helped her clean up anyway. "You didn't have to stay," Mara said. "You're exhausted." "So are you." "I just cooked. You were out in that mess for hours. Cooking for 4 men is its own kind of labor." He dried a pot, set it aside. "Thank you. For this. For everything." "I should be thanking you. You saved my life." "No. You saved your own life by opening that door. I just gave you somewhere to land." Mara set down the plate she'd been washing. "Colt, I need to tell you something. Before we go to the cabin. Before anything else." "All right." She turned to face him, gathering courage. "That night you showed up. I was going to kill myself. The gun was loaded. I was ready. If you'd been 5 minutes later, I know." "You know?" "I saw the gun on the table, saw your face, saw the way you'd given up on everything, including whether I froze outside your door." He reached for her hand. "I know, Mara. I've always known." "Then why? Why did I push? Why didn't I just leave you alone?" His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Because I recognized it. That look. That decision. I saw it in my own mirror for months after Mary died, and I knew. If someone had pushed me, had refused to let me disappear, maybe I'd have come back to myself faster. Maybe I wouldn't have wasted so much time wishing I was dead." Tears burned behind Mara's eyes. "I don't know if I deserve this. Any of this. Deserve's got nothing to do with it. We're here. We're alive. We get to choose what comes next." He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. "And I choose this. You. Us. Whatever this becomes." Mara buried her face in his chest, felt his heart beating steady and strong, and let herself cry. Not from grief this time. From relief. From the overwhelming weight of being seen, truly seen, and not turned away. They stood like that until the tears stopped, until her breathing evened out. Cole's shirt was soaked from her tears on top of the rain, but he didn't seem to care. "We should sleep," he said finally. "Long ride tomorrow if the storm passes." But he didn't let go. Neither did she. They stayed locked together, swaying slightly, while the storm hammered at the windows and the fire burned low, and something fragile and fierce took root between them. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The storm had passed, leaving everything fresh and clean. Cole saddled Duke and Grace while Mara packed supplies, food for 2 days, blankets, her revolver, which she'd asked Cole to fetch from the cabin weeks ago. Jack and Sam would hold down the ranch. They'd done it before. Cole trusted them. Still, he spent an hour going over everything that might need attention, making sure they knew where to find tools, how to handle problems. "We'll be fine," Jack said finally. "Go. Take care of your business." They rode out mid-morning, Mara on Duke now, managing him with a confidence that surprised her. The land had transformed from winter white to spring brown, mud and dead grass and patches of snow in shaded areas. Signs of life everywhere. Early flowers pushing through, birds returning, the world waking up. The ride north took most of the day. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat jerky and hardtack. Mara found herself nervous as they got closer, stomach tight with dread. "What if I can't do it?" she asked. "What if I see the place and fall apart?" "Then you fall apart and I put you back together. That's how this works." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." When they finally crested the rise and her cabin came into view, Mara's breath caught. It looked smaller than she remembered, more desolate. The repairs Cole had made were holding, the roof intact, the chimney straight. But the place radiated abandonment, loneliness, death. They dismounted. Cole tied the horses while Mara approached slowly, each step harder than the last. The door stuck. It always stuck, but yielded when she pulled hard. Inside was exactly as she'd left it. The table where she'd set the gun, the bed she'd shared with Thomas, the emptiness that had almost consumed her. She walked through slowly, touching things. The stove Thomas had been so proud of buying, the shelf where she'd kept her mother's dishes until she'd sold them for food money. The window where she'd stood so many mornings wondering if she had the strength to face another day. Cole stayed by the door, giving her space, letting her process. "I hated this place," Mara said quietly. "Every inch of it. It took everything from me." "That's not what took things. That was circumstance, bad luck. This is just walls and wood." "I know, but it's easier to hate the place than to hate fate or chance or whatever decides who lives and who dies." She went to the bedroom, pulled the wedding photograph from where she'd left it, looked at herself young and hopeful, Thomas grinning beside her. They'd been so sure, so certain they'd beat the odds. "I loved him," she said. "Part of me always will." "I know, but he's gone, and I'm still here. And I think," her voice cracked, "I think he'd want me to keep going, to find something worth living for." "I think so too." Mara set the photograph down, turned to Cole. "I don't need to stay. I've seen it. That's enough." "You sure?" "I'm sure. This was my past. I don't want it to be my future." They walked to Thomas's grave together. Mara pulled early wildflowers she'd gathered on the ride, laid them on the snow-patched ground, said a silent goodbye that felt more like permission. Permission to live, to want, to become someone other than Thomas Whitlock's widow. When she stood, Cole was waiting, patient as always, ready to go whenever she was. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing me here, for not letting me do this alone. You're not alone anymore. Remember that." They rode back as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Mara felt lighter than she had in years, like she'd set down a burden she didn't know she'd been carrying. When the ranch came into view, lights glowing warm in the windows, she felt something shift in her chest. Coming home. That's what this was. Not going back to somewhere she'd left, but coming home to somewhere she belonged. Cole must have felt it too. He looked at her as they dismounted, smiled that rare smile that transformed his whole face. "Welcome home," he said. "Home," Mara repeated, testing the word. It fit. Finally, after years of nothing fitting, something did. Inside, Jack had kept the fire going. Sam had started supper. The cabin was warm and smelled like food and felt lived in. Real. Mara hung up her coat, washed her hands, joined Sam at the stove without being asked. They cooked together while Cole and Jack discussed the day's work. Normal ranch evening. Normal life. The kind Mara had thought she'd never have again. Later, after supper and cleanup, after Jack and Sam had gone to the barn, Cole found her on the porch watching the stars. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right. I feel free. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Mara spoke the words she'd been holding on to all day. "I love you." Cole went still. "Mara, I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but it's true. I love you. Not the way I love Thomas. This is different. Harder earned, more deliberate, but it's love." He turned to her, cupped her face in both hands. "I love you too. Have for weeks. Maybe since you let me in out of that storm. Maybe since you trusted me enough to leave. What do we do now? Whatever we want, we've got time to figure it out." But time, as it turned out, had other plans. Because the next morning, Mara woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She knew exactly what she wanted, exactly what came next. She found Cole in the barn, checking on a cow in early labor. He looked up when she entered, smiled. "Morning." "Marry me," she said. His smile froze. "What?" "Marry me. I'm tired of slow, tired of careful. I want this. Want you. Want a life we build together instead of lives we're just surviving separately under the same roof." Cole stood slowly, crossed to her. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Are you?" "I've been sure since you laughed at that first calf, maybe before." He took her hands. "But Mara, people will talk. Will say it's too fast, too soon after Thomas." "Let them talk. I'm done living my life for other people's opinions." "Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you." She kissed him there in the barn, with the sun streaming through the gaps in the boards and the cow watching and her whole future spread out ahead of her like Montana land. Hard, unforgiving, but beautiful if you knew how to see it. They married on a Thursday in early April with Jack and Sam as witnesses and a circuit judge who happened to be passing through on his way to Helena. No ceremony, no fuss, Just vows spoken in the ranch yard with the cattle watching, and Bear sitting between them like he understood the significance. Mara wore the same dress she'd been married in before. She'd packed it without knowing why. But it hung differently now. Looser in some places, tighter in others. She'd lost weight during the starving months, gained some back doing ranch work. A different body for a different life. The judge was an older man with kind eyes, who didn't ask questions about how fast this was happening or whether it was proper. He just read the words, had them repeat their promises, declared them married under Montana law. "You can kiss your bride," he said to Cole. Cole did, gentle and sure, while Jack whistled and Sam clapped and Bear barked like he approved. When they broke apart, Mara felt tears on her cheeks, but they weren't sad ones, just overflow from feeling too much at once. "Mrs. Mercer," Cole said, testing the name. "Sounds strange." "You'll get used to it." "Will I?" "Eventually." He grinned. "Or you can keep being Mara Whitlock. I don't care what name you use as long as you stay." The judge accepted payment in beef and a hot meal, then rode on toward Helena. Jack and Sam made themselves scarce after supper, retreating to the barn with knowing looks. Mara cleaned up the dishes while Cole banked the fire, both of them suddenly awkward now that they were alone and married and the night stretched ahead. "I can sleep in the other room," Cole said finally. "If you need more time." "We're married." "I know, but that doesn't mean I don't expect anything you're not ready for." Mara dried her hands, turned to face him. "I'm ready. I'm terrified, but I'm ready." "That makes two of us." They stood there looking at each other until Mara laughed, a nervous, slightly hysterical sound. "This is ridiculous. We're acting like children. We're acting like people who've both been alone too long and forgot how this works. So what do we do? I guess we figure it out. Together." Cole crossed to her, took her hand, led her to his room, their room now. The bed was bigger than hers had been. The blankets newer. He'd cleaned earlier, she noticed, swept the floor, made everything as welcoming as a bachelor rancher knew how. What happened next was fumbling and awkward and nothing like the romance novels Mara had read as a girl. They bumped noses, got tangled in clothing. Cole apologized twice and Mara laughed once, and somewhere in the middle of it all, they found each other. Found a rhythm that worked. Found that broken people could still make something whole when they tried. Afterward, lying in the dark with Cole's arm around her, Mara felt the ghost of Thomas brush past. Not accusatory, not sad, just acknowledgement that she'd moved on, that life had continued, that love didn't diminish just because it multiplied. "You all right?" Cole asked quietly. "Yes." "You?" "Better than all right." He pulled her closer. "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me. For taking the risk. For all of it." Mara pressed her face into his shoulder, breathed in the smell of him that had become familiar. Soap and leather, and something earthier. Home, she thought. This is what home smells like now. "We're going to fight," she said. "Eventually. Two stubborn people living together, we're going to drive each other mad sometimes." "I know." "And I'm going to have bad days, days where I can't get out of bed because the grief comes back, where I remember Thomas and feel guilty for being happy." "I know that too. I'll have them too. Missing Mary. Wondering if I'm betraying her memory." "So what do we do when that happens?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "We tell each other. We don't hide it or pretend everything's fine. We just be honest, even when it's hard." "I can do that." "Then we'll be all right." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Mara woke in the gray dawn to find Cole already up and starting the fire, she felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or acceptance. The understanding that life didn't have to be perfect to be worth living. The weeks that followed established new patterns. Mara moved her things into Cole's room, though she kept some space for herself. The dresser where she stored her mother's quilt and Thomas's pocket watch. The corner where she worked on the ledgers. Cole made room without being asked, understanding that she needed pieces of herself that weren't defined by being someone's wife. They worked the ranch together with Jack and Sam, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Cole was better with the cattle, had instincts Mara couldn't match, but she was better at planning, at seeing 3 steps ahead. Together they made the place more efficient than it had ever been with Cole running it alone. The account started showing profit for the first time in years. Mara found places to cut costs without sacrificing quality. negotiated better prices with buyers who thought they could cheat a woman, and learned quickly that Mara Mercer didn't bluff. "You're ruthless," Cole said admiringly after she'd gotten a Helena supplier to drop his prices by 15%. "I'm practical. There's a difference." Not much of one, but he was proud of her. She could see it in the way he watched her work, the way he deferred to her judgment on business matters. It wasn't the kind of marriage where the man made all the decisions and the woman obeyed. It was a partnership, messy and imperfect, but functional. In May, Webster showed up again. Rode right into the yard like he owned it, Jim Webster with his foreman and another man Mara didn't recognize. She was in the garden. Cole had helped her start one, turning over soil that had never been planted. When they arrived, Cole came out of the barn, wiping his hands. "Webster." "Mercer. Heard you got married. Thought I'd come congratulate you." "That's kind, but we're busy, so if that's all—" "Actually, I came to make you an offer." Webster dismounted, looked around the ranch like he was assessing it. "I'm expanding. Looking to buy out some of the smaller operations. Figured you might be interested in selling." "I'm not." "Hear me out. I'll give you a fair price. Enough to set you and your new wife up somewhere easier. Maybe head to California. Warmer weather, less work." Mara stood slowly, brushed dirt from her hands. Cole caught her eye, gave a slight shake of his head. "Stay out of it." But Mara was done staying out of things. "We're not interested," she said, walking over. Webster's eyes slid to her, dismissive. "Ma'am, this is business. Why don't you let the men talk? Why don't you get off our property?" "Mara," Cole started. "No." She stepped forward, looked Webster straight in the eye. "You rode onto our land uninvited, made an offer we didn't ask for, and now you're suggesting we should sell because ranching is too hard for a woman. Did I get that right?" Webster's face reddened. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant. But here's the thing, Mr. Webster. I've survived things that would have broken you. I've starved and frozen and lost everything, and I'm still standing. So when you look at me and see someone weak who needs protecting, you're seeing what you want to see, not what's there." The foreman shifted uncomfortably. The third man, probably a buyer, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "This ranch is ours," Mara continued. "We built it together. We're making it profitable together. And we're not selling to you or anyone else just because you think women should stick to cooking and sewing." Webster's jaw worked. "You don't know what you're turning down." "I know exactly what I'm turning down. A bad deal from a man who thinks he can bully his way into getting what he wants." She stepped closer. "Now get off our land, and don't come back unless you're invited." For a moment, Webster looked like he might argue. But something in Mara's expression, the steel that 3 years of survival had forged, made him think better of it. He remounted, jerked his horse's head around. "You're making a mistake," he said. "That's our mistake to make." They rode off in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. When they were gone, Cole turned to Mara with something between shock and admiration. "That was stupid? I know. He could make things difficult for us. I was going to say magnificent." Cole pulled her close, kissed her hard. "You're magnificent. I'm tired of men like him thinking they can push us around." "Then we don't let them. We build this place up until we're too big to push." It became their mission. Through the hot summer months, they worked like demons, Cole and Mara and whatever hands they could hire. They expanded the herd, improved the grazing land, built a second barn. The ranch grew from a marginal operation to something substantial. Mara's bookkeeping kept them profitable. She tracked every penny, found inefficiencies, made hard decisions about what to keep and what to cut. Cole handled the physical work, but increasingly he relied on her judgment for the business side. "We should buy the Morrison place," Mara said one evening, spreading papers across the table. "Old man Morrison died last month. His kids don't want it. It's going cheap. We don't have the capital. We could get a loan, use our herd as collateral." She showed him the numbers. "Morrison's land connects to ours, gives us access to the river year-round. That alone is worth the risk." Cole studied the figures. "It's a gamble. Everything out here is a gamble, but this is a smart one." They bought the Morrison place in September. It stretched them financially, put them in debt for the first time. But it doubled their grazing land and gave them water rights that made the ranch viable long-term. Webster heard about it and wasn't happy. Started spreading rumors that Mara was running Cole, that he'd lost control of his own ranch to a woman. that the Mercer place would fail within a year under female management. "Let him talk," Cole said when the rumors got back to them. "Numbers don't lie. We're doing better than he is, and he knows it." But the talk bothered Mara more than she wanted to admit, not because she cared what Webster thought, but because it made her question herself. Was she pushing too hard, taking too many risks? What if she was wrong, and the ranch failed and Cole lost everything because of her ambition? She was sitting on the porch wrestling with these thoughts when Cole found her one evening in late October. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. That's a lie. You've been quiet for days." Mara was silent for a long moment. Then, "What if I'm ruining everything? What if Webster's right and I'm in over my head and I'm going to drag us both down?" Cole sat beside her, took her hand. "You're not ruining anything. You're building something." "But what if I fail?" "Then we fail together, and we figure out what comes next." He squeezed her hand. "Mara, you stood in a dying cabin with a gun to your head 8 months ago. Now you're running a successful ranch and making men like Webster nervous. That's not failure. That's survival turned into success." "It doesn't feel like success. It feels like I'm barely keeping my head above water." "That's how success always feels. You think I felt confident when I started this place? I was terrified every day. Still am sometimes. But you keep going anyway." "How?" "By remembering what the alternative is, by choosing to fight instead of surrender." He pulled her close. "You taught me that. Watching you come back from where you were, that reminded me why I'm here, what I'm fighting for." Mara leaned into him, felt the steady beat of his heart. "I love you. I love you too, even when you're stubborn and reckless and making deals that terrify me." "Especially then?" "Especially then." They sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The cattle were dark shapes against the dying light. The land stretched out around them, hard and unforgiving but theirs, built by their hands, sustained by their will. Winter came again, but this time Mara wasn't alone facing it. They worked together preparing, stockpiling hay, reinforcing buildings, making sure the cattle had shelter. When the first serious storm hit in November, they were ready. On Christmas Eve, Cole surprised her with a gift. Not bought, they didn't have money for luxuries, but made. A wooden box he'd carved, simple but elegant, with her initials on the lid. "For your important things," he said. "The watch. The photograph. Whatever you want to keep safe." Mara opened it, ran her fingers over the smooth wood. Inside he'd lined it with fabric from one of Mary's old dresses, a piece of his past, offered to hold pieces of hers. "It's beautiful. I wanted you to know you don't have to hide them. Thomas, your mother, the life before, they're part of you. I don't want you to forget them." She set the box aside, pulled him close. "Thank you for understanding that I can love you and still carry them with me. We're all made up of the people we've loved, lost or kept. They shape us." That night, lying in bed listening to the wind howl, Mara thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The hopeful bride who'd come west with Thomas, the desperate widow slowly starving in a cabin, the woman who'd opened the door to a stranger, the wife learning to build a new life from broken pieces. She wasn't any one of those people anymore. She was all of them, scarred and strong, and still learning what it meant to survive not just day to day, but year to year, to build something that lasted. In January, Mara realized she was pregnant. She'd missed her monthly cycle twice, but hadn't said anything, too afraid to hope. But when the morning sickness started, there was no denying it. She told Cole one evening after supper, just blurted it out while they were washing dishes. "I'm pregnant." He dropped the plate he'd been drying. It shattered on the floor. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at her. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor. But yes, I think so." Cole crossed to her in 2 steps, pulled her into his arms. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy?" Her voice was small. "Or is this too fast, too soon? I'm terrified, and happy, and terrified again." He pulled back to look at her. "But mostly happy." "If you are." Mara thought about it, about carrying new life, about bringing a child into this hard world, about all the ways it could go wrong. But she also thought about the ranch they'd built, the life they'd made, the strength they'd proven they had, and she felt something that might have been joy. "I'm happy," she said. "Scared, but happy. Then we'll be scared and happy together." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Mara was sick for months, could barely keep food down. The work didn't stop just because she was carrying a child. Cattle still needed tending. Accounts still needed managing. She pushed through, stubborn as ever, until Cole physically stopped her from lifting hay bales. "You're going to hurt yourself." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're pale as a ghost and you threw up twice this morning. Sit down. Let me handle the heavy work." "I'm pregnant, not dying." "I know the difference. I'm still not letting you hurt yourself out of pride." They fought about it, their first real fight as a married couple. Mara accused him of treating her like she was fragile. Cole accused her of being reckless with her health. They went to bed angry, woke up still angry, finally talked it through over breakfast. "I need to feel useful," Mara admitted. "If I can't work, what am I?" "You're my wife, the mother of my child, the person who keeps this whole operation running." Cole reached across the table. "But you can do that without breaking your back lifting things I can lift. Let me help. That's what partners do." "I'm not used to partners. I'm used to doing everything myself or dying." "I know. But you're not alone anymore. You can let me carry some of it." It was a hard lesson, harder than Mara expected. She'd spent so long being self-sufficient that accepting help felt like weakness. But slowly, she learned to delegate, learned to say when something was too much, learned that asking for help wasn't the same as giving up. The baby came in September, a month early and terrifying. Mara's labor started in the middle of the night, hard and fast. Cole rode for the doctor, but the baby wasn't waiting. By the time he got back, Sam had delivered a squalling, red-faced girl into Mara's shaking hands. "You did it," Sam said, grinning. "You did it." Mara held her daughter, this tiny, fierce thing that had fought its way into the world early, and felt something shift in her chest. Not the loss of who she'd been, but the addition of who she was becoming. Mother, builder, survivor, all of it at once. When Cole came back with the doctor, he found Mara sitting up in bed, exhausted but triumphant, holding their daughter. "Meet Grace," she said. "Named after the horse that brought us together." Cole's eyes filled with tears. He sat on the bed, touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "She's perfect." "She's early and too small, and we don't know if—" Mara's voice cracked. "She's a fighter, like her mother." He kissed Mara's forehead. "She'll be fine. We'll make sure of it." The doctor examined Grace, declared her small but healthy. Strong lungs, good color. She'd need careful watching, needed to gain weight. But she'd live. Over the next weeks, Mara learned what it meant to be a mother while still being everything else. The ranch didn't stop for a newborn. Cattle still needed tending. Accounts still needed keeping. She did it all with Grace strapped to her chest, the baby sleeping through noise and chaos like she'd been born to ranch life. "She's going to be tough," Cole observed one day, watching Grace sleep through a cattle auction. "She'll have to be. This isn't an easy life." "No, but it's a good one. We're building something that'll last, something we can pass on." Mara looked around at the ranch, bigger now, more successful than either of them had dreamed when she'd first arrived half-starved and suicidal. They'd done this, together, built a life from nothing but determination and refusal to quit. Webster never made another offer. His own ranch struggled while theirs thrived. Eventually, he sold out to a bigger operation and moved on, defeated by the land and his own arrogance. Other ranchers started coming to Mara for advice. How did she keep such good books? How did she negotiate such good prices? How did she manage ranch and family both? She never had a perfect answer. Just told them what Cole had told her. You survive by refusing to quit, by making hard choices, by accepting that you can't control everything, but you can control how you respond. Years passed. Grace grew strong and wild, more comfortable on horseback than on foot. They had a son 2 years later, Thomas, named for the man Mara had loved first, then another daughter. The ranch expanded. They hired permanent hands, built a bigger house. Through it all, Mara kept the wooden box Cole had given her. Inside was Thomas's pocket watch, the wedding photograph, a lock of Grace's baby hair, pieces of all her lives, all the versions of herself. She never forgot the cabin where she'd almost died, Visited it once a year, every spring, to put flowers on Thomas's grave and remember the girl who'd opened that door. Who'd chosen to live when dying would have been easier. On her 40th birthday, Cole found her on the porch watching the sunset. The kids were inside with Jack, still working for them after all these years, doing homework and arguing about whose turn it was to feed the chickens. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. "Everything, how far we've come, how close I came to missing all of this." She took his hand. "I think about that gun in the drawer, about how, if you'd been 5 minutes later, but I wasn't, and you opened the door. I almost didn't. But you did. That's what matters." He pulled her close. "You chose to live. Everything else came from that choice." Mara thought about that, about how one decision, opening a door instead of pulling a trigger, had led to everything she had now. The ranch, the children, the man beside her. A life worth living instead of a death worth escaping. "I used to think surviving meant just not dying," she said quietly. "Getting through one more day, one more hour. But that's not surviving. That's just existing." "What's surviving then?" "Building something, fighting for something, choosing life not just once but every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, "You taught me that. When I found you in that cabin, I was surviving too. Going through motions. But watching you come back from the edge, that reminded me what living actually meant. We saved each other." "Yeah, we did." They sat watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the Montana sky in shades of fire. The land stretched out around them, the same land that had tried to kill Mara once. But she'd fought back, had clawed her way from despair to something resembling happiness. It wasn't perfect. Life never was. There were still hard days. Days when the grief came back and she mourned Thomas all over again. Days when the memories of that winter threatened to drown her. Days when the responsibility of ranch and family felt overwhelming. But there were good days too. Days when Grace brought home her first ribbon from the county fair. Days when Thomas, her son, helped deliver his first calf. Days when she looked at Cole across the dinner table and felt grateful for storms and stubborn horses and second chances. The ranch prospered, not through luck or magic, but through relentless work and smart decisions and two people who refused to quit. They made it through droughts and hard winters and market crashes. Made it through childhood illnesses and broken bones and all the chaos that came with raising children on the frontier. When Mara turned 50, they held a party. Half the county showed up. Ranchers they'd competed with and cooperated with. Families they'd helped when times were hard. The doctor who'd delivered Grace and the judge who'd married them 20 years earlier. Someone asked Mara to make a speech. She hadn't prepared one, didn't like public speaking. But she stood up anyway because Cole was watching with that patient, knowing look that meant he believed she could do anything. "I'm not good at this," she started. "Public speaking, being the center of attention. But I wanted to say..." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 20 years ago, I was ready to die, ready to give up on everything. The land had beaten me. Life had beaten me. I couldn't see any reason to keep fighting." The room had gone quiet. People knew pieces of her story, the dead husband, the failing homestead, but not all of it, not the gun or the decision or how close she'd come. Then Cole showed up in a storm, and he didn't save me. That's not how it works. But he gave me a reason to save myself, to open a door instead of closing one, to choose living over dying. She looked at Cole. "Everything I have now came from that choice. This ranch, our children, all of you. None of it would exist if I'd given up that night." She paused, felt tears threatening, pushed through anyway. "So if you take anything from tonight, take this. Life is hard. The frontier is unforgiving. You're going to lose things and people and parts of yourself. You're going to want to quit, to give up, to stop fighting." She looked around the room at faces weathered by sun and hardship and survival. "But don't. Don't let the hard times win. Don't let loss define you. Choose to keep going even when it feels impossible. Because on the other side of impossible, that's where life is. That's where everything worth having lives." The room erupted in applause. Mara sat down quickly, embarrassed, but Cole's hand found hers under the table. Squeezed, held on. Later, after everyone had gone and the kids were asleep and the ranch was quiet, they walked out to look at the stars. The same stars that had looked down on Mara in that cabin. The same Montana sky that had witnessed her despair and her resurrection. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Not the cabin, but all of this. The work, the struggle. Would you choose differently if you could go back?" Mara thought about it honestly, about the easy path she could have taken, about what might have been if she'd stayed in Ohio or sold the homestead or never opened that door. "No," she said finally, "I wouldn't change any of it, not even the hard parts, because they made me who I am, and I like who I am now." "Who are you?" "Someone who survived, who built something from nothing, who learned that strength isn't about not breaking, it's about how you put yourself back together afterward." She looked at him. "I'm someone who knows that love doesn't diminish when you find it again. It multiplies. Thomas and you're both part of my story, both part of who I became." Cole pulled her close, and they stood there under the vast Montana sky, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. Not perfectly, not without scars, but whole enough, strong enough, stubborn enough to build something that lasted. The ranch would outlive them. Mara knew that. Grace would inherit it, or Thomas, or maybe they'd split it between all three children. The land would go on. The cattle would go on. The cycle of seasons and survival would continue. But what really mattered, was that they'd chosen life. Chosen to fight when giving up would have been easier. Chosen to build when destroying would have been simpler. Chosen love when loss felt safer. That was the legacy. Not the land or the cattle or the buildings they'd raised, but the choice. The daily, difficult, defiant choice to keep living. To keep trying. To keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today, even when all evidence suggested otherwise. Mara thought about the woman she'd been in that cabin, hollow and hopeless and ready to end it. That woman had made a choice too, to open a door. And from that single decision, everything else had flowed. The ranch, the marriage, the children, the life. One choice. That's all it took. One moment of courage in the face of despair. One decision to try instead of surrender. And if Mara could go back, if she could speak to that broken woman sitting at a table with a loaded gun, she'd tell her this. Open the door. Answer the knock. Take the risk. Because on the other side of that choice, there's a life worth living. A love worth finding. A strength you don't know you have yet. The frontier doesn't get easier. The land doesn't become less harsh. Loss doesn't stop hurting. But you become stronger at carrying it. Become better at survival. Become someone who knows that broken things can be remade into something new. That was what Mara had learned in 20 years of marriage and ranching and motherhood. That survival wasn't passive, wasn't just enduring until death finally came. Survival was active, deliberate, a choice made every single day to keep fighting, keep building, keep hoping. And sometimes, if you were lucky and stubborn and brave enough to keep choosing life, you got to build something beautiful from the broken pieces, something that lasted, something that mattered. As they walked back to the house, their house, built with their hands, filled with their family, Mara looked back one last time at the stars, the same stars that had watched her almost die, the same sky that had witnessed her transformation from victim to survivor to builder. "Thank you," she whispered to whatever force had brought Cole to her door that night. To fate or chance or just the random collision of two desperate people at exactly the right moment. Then she turned away from the past and walked into the house where her future waited, where her children slept and her husband stoked the fire and Bear dozed by the hearth, where life, messy and difficult and absolutely worth fighting for, continued. The door closed behind her, not ending the story, just ending this chapter. Because life didn't stop. It kept going, kept challenging, kept demanding that you choose survival over surrender. And Mara Mercer, who'd been Mara Whitlock, who'd been a dying woman in a frozen cabin, who'd been saved by nothing more than her own decision to answer a knock, she chose survival. Every day, every moment, for the rest of her life. That was the victory. Not that she'd survived, but that she'd chosen to, and kept choosing, again and again and again.